We have to say, hey, it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay if I don't have all the answers. And it's okay to rely on people who feel like they might be unreliable, but maybe they're not, because we have to give them a chance. And I can sense for you that there was a lot of pressure on you at the time. And it sounds like there's a lot of growth happening for everyone as well. But I didn't have that experience, but I did have the pressure on myself to be well. And that's I had no control of that, really. I had to, I did, of course, I had to eat well and not overexert myself and these types of things. But at the end of the day, I still hold myself to a very high standard, and I still have to cut myself some slack, a lot of the time. And I don't do that. And that's not fair.
This is the Recovery After Stroke podcast with Bill Gassiamis, helping you navigate recovery after stroke.
Hello and welcome to Recovery After Stroke, a podcast full of answers, advice, and practical tools for stroke survivors to help you take back your life after a stroke and build a stronger future. I'm your host, three-time stroke survivor, Bill Gassiamis. After my own life was turned upside down and I went from being an active father to being stuck in hospital, I knew if I wanted to get back to the life I loved before, my recovery was up to me. After years of researching and discovering, I learned how to heal my brain and rebuild a healthier and happier life than I ever dreamed possible. And now I've made it my mission to empower other stroke survivors like you to recover faster, achieve your goals, and take back the freedom you deserve. If you enjoy this episode and want more resources, accessible training, and hands-on support, check out my Recovery After Stroke membership community, created especially for stroke survivors and caregivers. This is your clear pathway to transform your symptoms, reduce your anxiety, and navigate your journey to recovery with confidence. Head to recoveryafterstroke.com to find out more after this episode. But for now, let's dive right into today's show. This is episode 171, and my guest today is Steve Molter, who experienced a spontaneous vertebral artery dissection aged 33, which caused a stroke. This episode was recorded the day after Thanksgiving, and it begins with giving thanks for some of the things important to us. Steve Molter, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Bill. It's awesome to be here. I'm grateful for the time. It's been a few months since I think we started corresponding, and finally I felt like, oh my gosh, I have time, and here we go. So it's the day after Thanksgiving here, but it's a very chill day. So I'm glad we got to chat.
Happy Thanksgiving for you and all the American and Canadian people who have Thanksgiving. Tell me about that, actually. What's Thanksgiving about? Because people in Australia don't have that, because it had something to do with a specific event in America, and as a result, we don't know what that is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if I can go back to my grade school days, remembering what I was told, it was about the Native Americans spending time with the settlers, the early settlers, and sharing a meal and spending time together in community. So I treat Thanksgiving a little differently than I think this typical family would, maybe. I'm not a big fan of holidays. I don't know why. I just don't really get the spirit. You know what I mean? But for Thanksgiving, I usually, when I was single, I would just write music by myself. I would just shut myself away, write music all day, and just do that. That was my way to celebrate. And now I'm married, and we kind of just chill. We actually just got back from a trip yesterday. So on Thanksgiving, we flew back and just hung out, played with our cats, just relaxed, had some food, a couple drinks, chill out. So for me, it's providing that gratitude space to my wife, especially, but to the people that I care about, and just want to show thanks. So I guess it does come full circle,
I love that idea of just doing nothing and just chilling out for once, one time a year. I mean, it's such a great thing. And I think I share your sentiments about the holidays, is because people make such a fuss about one day, and it takes so long to get there, and they go over and over and over about it. And it's by the end of it, I think everyone is missing actually what the day is about.
it becomes so stressful, right?
Yeah.
You
And
know,
I can't,
planning and coordinating and cooking and the whole thing. And it's like so
yeah.
much work.
And I'm happy to have people over, but it for me, in my mind, it's like, on this day, come over for lunch and stay as long as you want. And
Yeah,
that's it.
exactly.
And if you can make it, come. And if you can't, don't. If you can bring something, bring it. If you can't, don't.
Right.
That's what I'd like to do. But that, of course, that doesn't go down well in my world. We have to fuss about it and make a whole song and dance about it. And then it becomes about all the other things. And it's not about having the people over that you want to have over or you want to see.
Right.
And then it's like, oh yeah, but what time can we come over? Because we've got to go over there and then we've got to go over there. And it's like, oh my gosh, guys, I'm just going to be here. And I'm telling
Yeah.
you, if you can, just come over. That's it.
That's
So,
that's the way to go. I grew up, so I live in Los Angeles, California right now. I grew up outside of Boston, Massachusetts. So it's like the other side of the country. And when I was living in LA for a very long time, and I'd go back to visit, and it was so challenging to see everyone because of scheduling. And so I would just be like, all right, I'm going to be at this place from this period of time to this period of time. Come hang out if you can. I would love to see you. And if you can't, that's okay. We'll see you next time, or we'll talk or whatever. And I feel you deeply with that.
a friend of mine is moving from Melbourne, Australia to Queensland, Australia. And she's somebody that we just interact with on Facebook because we grew up together, we went to school together, but we haven't really hung out for 25 years or so. And there's a group of people on these Facebook groups, you know, similar, from a similar place in our world, in our mutual world. And she basically said, look, we're going to be moving to Queensland and I'd love to catch up with everybody. But she made the one fatal mistake. She didn't say, on this day, I'm going to be in this bar for this many hours. If you're in Melbourne and you can come, I'd love to see you. So what she did, she put it out there to about 10 people. What are you guys availability like? And how about this bar and how about that bar? And it just became, I just switched off all the notifications. I'm going to go back in. I'm going to check the date. If it works, I'm going to go. If I can't, I'm just going to send her a message and say all the best and leave it at that. See you on Facebook.
Exactly. It's the way to go. Absolutely.
Before we get stuck right into the episode, I want to actually talk about Thanksgiving. It falls on the anniversary of the day that I had brain surgery.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't realize that until just this year. So
yeah,
how about that? That's an awesome way for me to remember the anniversary of my brain surgery. It was also the day of the patron Saint Catherine. So in Greece, it's a big deal, this Saint Catherine's Day, or any patron saint day. So you know, everybody who is a Catherine celebrates that name day, I suppose.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I'm thankful for a really good outcome after surgery. I'm thankful for the stroke. I'm thankful for all the roadblocks. I'm thankful for the podcast, and I'm thankful for all the people I've met through that. Thankful for the people that have asked for help or have come forward to say, you know, can we get coaching? I'm thankful for the entire 9-year journey since February 2012, which is when my journey started. And I'm thankful for all the shitty shit that goes with it, because it just reminds me that I'm alive, you know, and I'm ready to solve more problems. All I got to do is continue to solve problems. And some of those solutions aren't the best, but they're solutions, you know, and I get to move forward and I get to kind of put them behind me. So that's what I'm thankful for. And then today, finally, I'm thankful for you being here right now in California, and I'm here in Australia, in Melbourne, and we're sharing this amazing technology that brings us together from so far away. I mean, that's next level.
It's unreal. I really appreciate you calling out the gratitude for the strokes themselves, right? You know, we'll get into the whole thing, but when I meet people and I tell them, oh, I'm a stroke survivor, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, it was like probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me outside of like meeting my wife, you know, one of the best things that's ever happened, because it showed me who I was, and I was able to learn what I was made of when I was in the point when I was like, oh, like this doesn't look good. But I didn't know. And there's like a sense of, I don't want to use the word humor, but there was definitely a sense, I brought a sense of humor into the hospital when I was in there, you know what I mean? And I was grateful that the nurses and the doctors were able to share that space with me, that they weren't so serious that it felt serious, right? But we were able to kind of go into a space of joy, even though it was scary times. So I'm grateful that you bring that up. We shared our initial strokes in the same year. So mine was September 11th, 2012. That's when I had my first stroke.
An
Yeah,
infamous
exactly.
date in American history as well as
Big time.
yours.
And it's funny because that that date will always be shared, right? And that's fine. But I celebrate on mine. I have like a party, generally just have some friends over and we just celebrate my survival, and it's great. We just do nothing special, but it's a special day. But I share that with such a, like you said, infamous day. It's kind of tough to go out and celebrate loudly, so I just kind of do it on the subtle. But I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to celebrate, that I have the opportunity to do something positive on that day, which is so brutal, for so many. So
yeah, it's your day too, right? So you're entitled to celebrate it however you want, and you're not being insensitive. Actually, what I love about a lot of non-Greek people is that they celebrate life on the day of somebody's funeral or death or whatever. They actually celebrate the life of the person. And in Greek culture, where my parents come from, there isn't that. You actually mourn and you don't really celebrate the life. You don't speak about where that person came from, what they achieved, what they did. You just get together and you're being miserable about it. And it's kind of, there's a use for that as well, but I can see the other side of celebrating life, right? And just because this historical event happened doesn't mean that you can't celebrate your recovery. I mean, if I was involved in something like September 11 and I survived that, I would be celebrating the heck out of that, going, man, I made it out of here,
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the morning. There's a grief period, right? There's absolutely a period that you have to explore your grief, allow your grief to come in, but you can't live there. You can't stay there. You have to move on. You have to grow. You have to change. You have to flourish, right? That's what life is. It's for people to flourish, for people to shine. And I was alone at the period when mine kind of took place. And so like, I didn't have a wife, I didn't have a girlfriend. I had just one family member in LA. But I still felt protected and I still felt safe, even though I was like, oh, well, I'm not sure if this is gonna, I don't know what's gonna happen, but I still felt safe. And that's the thing I celebrate, right? That response, that connection that I have with people that I've made since then and had made prior, right? So yeah, it's an interesting process of grieving and then celebrating when you are no longer grieving, right?
How old were you?
My gosh, now I'm gonna date myself. 33. I was 33 at the time.
Yeah, wow.
So it was like young-ish. And what I learned at the time was that it's actually not that young. Like statistically, it's not terribly unlikely for someone in their 30s to have a stroke. It's not the majority. But I was 33 and I had just gotten back from a wedding. One of my best friends got married and I was his best man. And I was on the boat. We was in Catalina, which is an island off the coast of California. And we were on a boat the night before, 2 nights before the wedding. And we were it was chill, just chill, like having a couple drinks, having a couple laughs, listening to some music, hanging out. And all of a sudden I just got like a really bad headache. I felt like nauseous. I was like, I'm just gonna stop drinking. I'm gonna chill out, sit on the side of the, just sit down. And I got back to the hotel, or not the hotel, we were staying at a friend's house. Got back and I just took ibuprofen to, like, maybe it was a headache or a migraine, I don't know. Just took ibuprofen and it dulled the pain a little bit, but it was this deep sort of like ache in my neck, in the back of my neck, just below the base of my skull on the right side. And that just began the whole process of like, that was the beginning. And then 5 days later, there's so much detail, and I'm not going to go into every detail, but the wedding went off without hitch. I gave my speech. It was awesome. We danced, we laughed, we had fun. Everybody had a great time. And then we got back to California, to LA. And it was like 5 days later, and it was September 11th. And I went to work, and I just started getting like blurry splotches in my vision, just like, and I was like, what was that? So I went to my eye doctor. He's like, I don't see anything. I can't tell. He's like, I don't see anything. And then I went to lunch, and I was working on a speech. I was actually another best man. Like the following month, I was going to be another best man for another one of my best friends. And I was working on the speech at lunch, and I worked in Santa Monica at the time, and just like overlooking the ocean. It was beautiful. And I was walking back to my office, and I remember seeing a tree, like a palm tree, and the palm tree was really tall, and they were cutting it down. And so the way you cut a palm tree down is you take off the head first. So there's like where so they go up and they like behead it. And so I thought that was funny. And I was like, oh, that's funny. They're like beheading the tree. And so I took a picture. And the second I took that picture, my vision went to like a pinhole, and I got nauseous and headache, and the pain hit. And I didn't lose consciousness, but I was able to find myself to a bench and ultimately get help and get to the hospital. And it was scary, I mean, it's scary to be like, oh, I thought it was a migraine, I had no idea. And I'm like I was trained at the time to recognize stroke, but good luck on doing it on yourself, because I was just like, there's no way it can be anything that bad. You just don't believe it. I didn't believe it at the time,
What kind of training did you have?
So it was like, I honestly don't remember what it's called, but it's like emergency training. So recognizing stroke, recognizing how to deal with like people who have heart attack, strokes, CPR, that type of training, like lifesaver training, first aid. That's the word. I should know it by now. So basically just kind of standard first aid training that a few people at the office got trained on every year. And I was one of those folks at the time. So, but I was completely subjective,
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know, it must be a migraine, because this is what migraines feel like, is what people told me,
So that 5 days prior to that, did you have other signs and symptoms as well? Or was that initial, thing that you experienced and then you decided to put the drink down? Was that it? Did it go away, or did it kind of resonate?
It kind of stayed. And so it's a good question, because at first it was just like a dull ache. And so the ibuprofen kind of helped, but not really. I recognize now that it wasn't helping at all. But the clot, basically, I'll tell you exactly what happened in a moment. But the symptoms that I were feeling was just like ache, pain, and like I wanted to crack my neck. I wanted to like stretch it, it was like, felt like tight, and I just wanted to stretch it. And when I got home, and it was that morning it was the night before the 11th, so the night of September 10th, I went to sleep, and I again took ibuprofen. I tried to like sleep on my head so that it was stretched, because I thought it was like a muscle thing. It was not. And then I woke up the next day, and I ultimately got to the hospital. When I got to the hospital, they didn't know what it was. They gave me meds for migraine, because I was like, I think it's migraine. They didn't know. They couldn't see anything wrong. I looked fine. I didn't have the loss of muscle. It was just, I looked normal. I could do all the things. I could see when they did the visual test, I could see through my pinhole perfectly. So like it was just like they didn't know what was going on. And it took until the next day when I had another stroke. So it was the same injury, but another, stroke took place. And then they were able to pinpoint. That was brutal, by the way, because they couldn't give me meds either, because they were like, you have to tell us how it feels. And I was like, okay, it hurts really bad. But ultimately, the neurologist who helped me found the blood had already started to like reroute itself around the injury. So my brain was already like, oh, like fix. And it was this like tiny tear that happened. called, it was spontaneous vertebral artery dissection. And so the dissection is when there's the tear in the artery. No idea how it happened. And the artery like tore and clotted. And then that clot prevented the blood going to my brain. And then, 2 parts of my brain were like, see ya.
Yeah.
And it was challenging. So the symptoms were strange from my experience, from my understanding of what symptoms were for stroke. And that was challenging for me.
Yeah, it's challenging because, oh man, like everything about it's challenging because you've never experienced it. You don't have, you're 33, you've probably been very healthy until then. And you don't have a reference point sort of to where to begin from. How do I tackle this? How do I manage it? And then you're hoping that somebody else is going to tell you these things and solve these problems for you. And then they just say to you, look, there's this thing, we found that, we fixed it, and go home and you should be right. And there's still not that after sales service, there's no after sales service, we fixed that. And now what, guys? Like, what do I do with this thing?
Right. And that, I understand from what I know of your story, that was extremely challenging. And I'm curious to learn more about that from you, because for me, it was like, I had my first stroke on the 11th, the second one I had on the 12th. And they were like, that kind of showed them, okay, like now we kind of know. We thought we were going to have to do brain surgery, but we're not going to. That was nice to have that, because that was scary. But like after I had that second stroke, I was very much like, am I going to die?
If you've had a stroke and you're in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind. Like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously you've never had a stroke before. You probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
Like, I don't know. I really don't know. And the doctor couldn't guarantee that I wouldn't, because he was still figuring it out. And so there's that like brief moment. And thankfully my moment was brief when I was faced with this mortality of like, okay, this is it. And I legitimately thought, this is it. I might die tonight. And that's a scary thought, And I went through the whole process of like, my brother is married. He had 2 kids. His daughter, my niece, had just been born like 2 months prior. And like, I would never have met her. My nephew would probably never remember me, except for pictures and stories. And, it's a challenging space to be alone in that. And I was just in the hospital bed by myself thinking, this is it. And so I like wrote notes to my family and was like, it was tough, but it was brief. And when the doctor came in and told me, here's the deal, here's what we're doing, we're going to fix it, and we're not going to have to do surgery, I think everything's going to be okay. Man, what a relief, But I'm curious, like, so for me after that, I got sent home, and it was scary. And honestly, the scariest part of this whole process was the first night I was alone and not in the ICU, because I was like trying to sleep, but I'm like, if anything goes wrong, I'm dead, like 100%. But in the ICU, they're like on you, And so I'm curious for you, like what happened when you got out, like you had the setback, which was pretty severe. I would love to hear about what your thought process was during that. And they're like, hey, good luck, send you off. And then
I'm going to use the word oblivious because I wasn't oblivious. I acted oblivious, and it's sort of kind of helped. So the first time wasn't actually the first time, I think now, right? So I reckon back in September of 2010, I had a massive migraine 3 days out of action, couldn't do anything for 3 days. And you know how you guys have the NFL Super Bowl? Well, we have here the AFL Grand Final. It was the week of the Grand Final, and I went to the Grand Final, and I spent my team was in the Grand Final, so I spent the entire time, yelling and screaming and urging them on, and hoping that all the rest of the team broke their legs so that we would win, right? Of the other team,
Classic sports, man. Of course.
Yeah. So, but that was a Saturday, and then by the Wednesday of the following week, I was still really bad, and we drew. That game actually ended in a no result. And back then, what they used to do was they would replay it the following week. Now, 100,000 people get to go there. And I had tickets to that event because of my brother. He got me tickets to that event. And then he also said to me, I've got a ticket for next week. And I'm like, oh my God, like, I can't believe it.
Do this.
Yeah. But I'm not going to go, Harry. I'm not going to go.
Right.
He said, why not? So I've got this headache, man, and I'm afraid that it's going to get worse. I'm going to make it worse. I don't know why it happened, but like, it's really bothering me. And what I had done is I went to a hospital on that Wednesday, and they did a scan. They did a lumbar puncture, and they did a CT. And because there hadn't been a bleed yet, what the AVM, I reckon, had done is it had just kind of swollen or enlarged or something, and it started to interfere with my brain. And because it hadn't bled yet, they missed it on the scan. They did a lumbar puncture. There was no blood in my cerebral spinal fluid, and they said, just go home, you'll be right. And sure enough, a week later I was fine. And then I was fine for the entire time until February 2012. I woke up with a numb sensation on my toe. That spread over 7 days. I ignored it. Like you, I made up a couple of different reasons as to why it was happening. I went to hospital. They said, we found a bleed on your brain. And I'm like, okay. And then they said, look, well, no, they said, we found a shadow on your brain, and we don't know what it is. It might be caused by a bleed. It might be a tumor. The tumor might be benign. It might be cancerous. And I'm like, and then
can you narrow that down, please? Right.
And I'm like, did you need to give me all the options? Could you just like leave it at, we found something there and we're going to work it out, Right. And that was the scariest moment for me, because then he left. He gave me that, and he just left. He goes, is there anything? It was 11 p.m. on a Friday night. He says, is there any question? Do you have any questions? I'm like, no, I don't have any questions, but whatever, Right. So I had to sleep through the rest of the night, woke up in the morning, and had to tell my family. And that was difficult because I know that they're not mild-mannered. They're not calm and collected. And my biggest issue in this whole process was managing the emotions of the rest of my family. My God. And that was so annoying, but it was the biggest job. If I could keep them calm, then that would help me remain calm and take control of my emotional state, right? So at that time, what I did was I just went through life thinking, no matter what happens, we're going to solve these problems. We're going to overcome it. I was kind of always a problem solver. I was always this kind of guy who glass half full, always. Never had any of those types of issues where I was leaning towards the negative or the doom and gloom. Never, ever. I was just always super positive. And I would always do this, okay, what's good about this situation? Or what's something that's funny about this situation? And I would find things to distract me from the potential downfall of, the spiral into the abyss, So I wasn't scared, and I realized I was mortal, but that didn't scare me. What bothered me was that I knew I had done some wrong things in the past. I had done some wrongs, and my ego finally let go, and I was able to notice through my heart that what I need to do is rectify those situations. So I describe it as my head completely switched off. It allowed my heart to come online. And then I was able to rectify a lot of those issues that I'd created with loved ones, especially my wife and my kids and my parents and my brother and everybody who I felt that I played a part in some of our difficult interactions, which of course I did. But for the first time, I was able to admit it and go, okay, I've got to make this good. So I just started being the person who I actually wanted to be.
Yeah.
I started apologizing, telling them that I loved them. And I started doing all these things that I should have done years and years before that I couldn't do because they were wrong and they had to apologize first.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, they're kids. They're just freaking 12 and 15 or something, 16. And it's like, they don't know how to interact with their father like that yet, because I haven't led the way in that example. I've been the opposite. So they're doing what I'm doing and I've got to make it right. So what I did is I did a lot of retracing of my steps, apologizing for these things. And then when I got to the point of the second bleed, then it was just a lot of what am I experiencing and how can I overcome it? And what do I need to do right now? Like, what's the most important thing to do right now? What's the next first step?
Right.
And that was just, okay, so if that meant do nothing all day, that meant do nothing. If that meant do a little bit extra tomorrow, that meant do a little bit extra. I still tried to run my property maintenance business. My dad would pick me up and take me for quotes. I didn't win any work. And I imagine it was because I was actually turning up and I must have sounded like I was drugged.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I was normal, but of course I wasn't interacting normally with anybody. Everybody knew that I wasn't normal, but I thought I was. So I just went about business. Now I couldn't actually physically work. I couldn't drive. I couldn't do any of those things. But at the whole time, I wasn't afraid of dying or death or any of that stuff. I just wanted to make amends and put things right. And then when I did that, I was fine. So I set up my, in 2013, we traveled to the States and I set up my, for the first time I did my will and testament and all that kind of stuff. So that if we didn't make it back for whatever reason, then everything was going to be okay. The kids were all sorted, all that was organized. And that was a real big relief to me that I had also done that and ticked that off, so that people aren't wondering what my intentions were or what I was thinking, and I'm not leaving it up to others to make difficult decisions in a difficult time. So I wanted to start to lead by example. And the previous example was work like an idiot, as many hours a day as you can, do everything yourself, never delegate anything, and then struggle and suffer and complain that you never have any time for yourself and blame everybody else for it. So it was time not to do that anymore. But I only got caught into that zone. I was only in that zone for, it's still a long time. By the time I was 37, I was in that zone for about 10 years. And that was my trying to discover like what happens when you don't work for somebody else who gives you everything on a platter and tells you just turn up, this is your task for the day, do that task. Well, I had to learn how to be a business person, but a successful one. I didn't realize meant that you don't actually have to do everything and work 18 hours a day. You have to find ways to solve problems. And when I was in hospital, the second time after the second bleed, I had by the time I got there, which was 6 weeks after the first bleed, I had delegated all my quoting, all my work, everything to a whole bunch of other people. They were doing it for me. I was just turning up and meeting with the client. I had notified the clients that I was unwell. So they were happy to see me and just chat about things. And the business was turning over more money than ever. We had more work than ever. And I was doing way less than I had ever done.
Yeah.
And it's like, what the hell? Like everything got flipped over. And I was sicker than I'd ever been. I had less energy. I had fatigue. I had all these things. And everything else was just was skyrocketing. I was like, how did I end up in this situation? And why did I have to wait till a couple of bleeds in the brain to get to this point? So weird.
There's so many things that you shared there that resonate deeply with me. The first thing is that you weren't afraid. And that was something that I had experienced as well. I was like, I might die tonight. I'm not afraid to die, but I'm sad that I will not have these experiences.
Yeah,
right. My niece and nephew, for example, seeing them again for the first time for my niece. But as you told that, there is such a roller coaster, right? Because it's like progress isn't linear, right? You don't just get better. You don't have a problem and then get better. It's like up and down and over here and back and up. And that's the hardest thing. The thing that I feel like helped me the most was letting go of all of it and saying, you know what, I can't do these things. I couldn't, like you, I couldn't do any physical labor. I couldn't walk down the street without being fatigued, winded, you know? And so I couldn't go grocery shopping. I couldn't drive for 90 days or something like that, couple months. I couldn't go grocery shopping. I had to rely on people. I had to ask for help a lot. And like you, I was extremely self-sufficient. I had been single for a long time. I did it all myself and I was happy to do it. And then when this happened, I couldn't. And asking for help is very vulnerable, you know? And I had to dig more deeply into the vulnerability, something I was cultivating prior to the strokes, but it was still something that was challenging. I love the way you talk about delegation because I'm a manager in my life. I'm a design manager, and the best thing I can do is to delegate to the people who know best and get out of their way, right? And in situations when we are unwell, and like I was, and like you were, we can't do it. We are the worst person for the job in a lot of sense. So we have to give it to the people who are the best. I felt like that in the hospital. I was like, I'm not a neurologist, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut and try to have a good attitude as best I can, because I don't know what I'm talking about. The nurses, I don't know anything that they're doing. I'm just going to do the same thing. The challenge that I hear you had was, or the way you described it, it sounds like you had to kind of be the one to maintain the stress level, right? You had to keep your family de-stressed. I was lucky enough that the folks directly in my circle, my cousin, my best friend and his wife, or his fiance, they were the ones about to get married. They really kept they kept me insulated from that stress. They never told me what they went through until I was long passed into recovery. And it's challenging because when you're the one, the only thing you have control of is your response. And so you have to say, you know what, I need to be cool. And I told my parents, like, you cannot come out here, because they lived in Massachusetts at the time, 3,000 miles away. So like, they were like, we're going to come out. I was like, absolutely not, because that stress will just like, And so I was lucky that I could get the space. It was challenging because I had the space too at the same time on the flip side of the coin. But I was able to navigate, and I was able to maintain, and I was able to be calm and to face and cope with the challenges that I had to, without adding any extra on. So it was just the recovery. That was the thing that mattered to me. I was very lucky for that. I'm very appreciative for that. So
I love that. Just the recovery.
It's just the recovery. I have to ask. I've spent some time in Melbourne, and two of my friends, one is an Essendon supporter and one's a Bulldog supporter. And so I have like merch from both of them. somewhere, like koozies and scarves and things somewhere around here. But I'm curious who you support. Not that I know a lot.
I support Collingwood.
Okay, yeah.
It's one of the most famous
you-
clubs in the world. It's one of the most
Yeah,
supported clubs in Australia, and
yeah.
we have the luck when we get to the grand final. We have the same luck that the Buffalo Bills have in the NFL, right?
I love it.
And I'm a Buffalo Bills fan just simply because they have the name Bill,
Because you
right?
know. Yeah. Oh, that's fair. Yeah.
Right. So
And then
I picked up the Bills in the 90s, and I felt like I had
like
done the worst thing for them, because as soon as I discovered them, they just kept attending and
Super Bowl
losing,
loss, Super
attending
Bowl
and
loss, Super
losing.
Bowl.
So my team
That's
has
funny.
made the most grand finals, and it has lost the most grand finals. Right. And we have not won the most. We're very close to having won the most, but we have lost the most grand finals. And it's like, I don't want to, I don't want to be associated with teams like that, but they're my teams. What can I
Too
do?
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Oh, that's awesome.
But
I bring it up just because Melbourne is a space in my heart for sure. I spent like a month there back in 2016 and had the best time. I have good friends who live there, and are raising families there, and it's a beautiful place. I love it. I can't wait to get back.
yeah, it's a beautiful place. It's a chill place. There's a lot of resources. It's a very great place to have a stroke because the facilities are amazing. The best hospitals in the
Love to have a
world,
stroke there. Yeah,
Um,
I know the feeling. Yeah.
But what's interesting about your journey and the whole football thing is that the whole mentality is all about, and football teams are starting to now be a little bit smarter in the way they approach things. They analyze a little. They understand how it's important to control emotions. Where in the old days, all in brawls and spontaneous, just crazy non-football events would be happening on the football field. And you're kind of starting to see how all of society is moving away from just emotionally responding to learning that it's really important to get a grip and hold your emotions at bay when it's important, at the right time, at the right place. And what's also interesting about my team is that they may have the most losses in a grand final, but they also have the most wins. And that is because they have the most attendances in a grand final. So what it becomes later, it becomes a numbers game. So for us, why that's relevant to us in recovery is that the more attempts you make at recovery, the more chances are that you're going to have setbacks, but then the more chances are you're going to have wins as well, right? So it's what you said. It's about right now, if you don't have the distractions of everyone's emotional state and you just have the mindset of a recovery and nothing else, you're going to get a better version of recovery than you would have if you had to deal with all the rest of the junk that's going on in the periphery that's not important or relevant to recovery, right? It becomes a really selfish time, and it's okay to be selfish then and make it about you. And those people turning up that used to come and used to make it about them, oh man, I sprained my foot the other day, like, I know what you're going through. It's like, no, you don't know shit. Like, you sprained your foot, there's nothing wrong inside your brain. And there's something in my brain that's hurting, that doesn't work, and I might die tomorrow, and you're going to sprain foot, and you reckon that now's the time to compare that to me? No, it's not. Be quiet, leave, go away. I listen to the Jordan Peterson podcast every once in a while, and he has this saying that he brings up from time to time, and I'm pretty sure it's in his books. He talks about if you're going to turn up to a funeral, be the best person at that funeral for people to come to who need solutions to what the hell to do at a funeral, or how to behave, or how to deal with the tragedy and all that kind of stuff. So it's about taking responsibility and discovering how you need to behave appropriately at the correct
Yes.
time for the circumstances that people are experiencing. And it's like, yeah, like I want to be that guy. I want to be the best guy at the funeral, but I want to be the best guy when it comes to me dealing with my own stroke recovery. And I think one of the challenges that I always have with religion, and it's not that belief in God or not, it's that religion outsources most of the time responsibility on some thing happening in your life to some being out there that we can't really see. Like if you want something good to happen, ask God. If it didn't happen, it wasn't God's will.
Right.
Well, you know, maybe you didn't get off your ass and try for it enough, or maybe you didn't go back when you got the setbacks. Maybe, you know, that was the issue. So I said this underlying kind of underlying tone in my family and in the families that we hang out with is this whole, you know, I'm going to go and pray for you. That's great. Don't pray for me, pray for you. Pray for you to be the best person that you can be, so that when I need you, I can call on you. Because when I was in hospital the first time, my dad got the news, got ready to come see me, didn't take his medication, or took his medication on an empty stomach, or did something wrong with his medication. This guy is 6'1" or 2, and is like 100 and something kilos, which is, I'm not sure how many pounds, a couple of 100 pounds, and it's 220 pounds or something.
Yeah, I got
right? It's a big guy, right?
Yeah.
And he collapses at home. My mum is half his size. And now my mum has got my dad on the ground in the courtyard and her son in hospital.
Right.
And it's like, what the hell's going on? And now she's got to get the ambulance there to pick him up and come and visit me, right? And she comes to visit me, and I said to her, where's Dad? He's downstairs. What do you mean he's downstairs?
Yeah, right. He's down the hall, right?
Yeah, tell him to come up. No, he's downstairs in emergency. He fell over, collapsed. I said, what do you mean? Well, he collapsed because he didn't do some of his medications and da-da-da. So my dad lost his shit emotionally, couldn't think straight, couldn't do anything, didn't do the right thing, collapsed, and now mum's treating, mum's now managing that whole process with me and my dad, both in the same hospital. So I've said to the nurses, right, wheel me down to my dad. I want to go see my dad, you know, get me out of here. And I went down and had to see my dad. Well, this thing is in my brain bleeding, doing whatever the hell it's doing. So that was that, right? Now, my wife's real stoic. She's a real amazing lady. She's great. She's not the best at managing her emotional state, but neither is her entire family, right? They really struggle with that. And, you know, and she went through a lot. And when I had my third bleed, I think within 2 weeks after that, her mum passed away. So she was going through a very stressful time. And a week before my surgery, my brain surgery, we had to bury her.
Oh my God.
Right. So it's horrific circumstances. So we've done that. And she's not looking after herself properly. As you can imagine, people might not do that. And then when I go into brain surgery, come out of that, and then I'm in recovery, she collapses. And now I'm in hospital and I'm calling nurses over and I'm saying, my wife is collapsing and she's in bed in the bedroom in my ward next to me. And some weird reason is they won't take her and care for her. They said to her, you have to go to emergency. So she had to walk down to emergency, admit herself and say, oh, I'm not feeling well, I collapsed or something like that. So she then does that, right? She goes there and they admit her, and I don't know where my wife is, and I'm in recovery with a wound on my head. I can't walk. I can't do any of these things because my left side's gone. And then I want to find out where my wife is, and she is in a bed connected to all the heart monitors and all these other monitors and all that sort of stuff. And I'm in there in my wheelchair 2 days after brain surgery. And my wife, I said to her, like, do they know what happened? What's going on? She goes, I don't know. They're doing tests, etc. And my brain surgeon, my neurosurgeon, walks past us and looks just as he does in all, wards probably.
Yeah.
And then he does a double take and he goes, what the hell's going on? What are you two doing down here? I said to
Oh
him,
my God.
I said to him, well, I'm here because my wife's unwell. We don't know what's wrong with her. She collapsed. And he's going, wow, let me find out what's going on. Let me get you guys some answers, etc. So my challenge is, you can see it's like really was about trying to manage the other people around me because they were dropping like flies. And
I don't mean to laugh. I just think it's like, it's been so long, and like we go through those things, and I can see you have a smile as you're telling the story, and I definitely don't mean to laugh, because what an awful time for everyone. But like that, people are just like literally collapsing. I mean, it's like unreal. It's like a farce. It's like a joke. You know what I mean? It's like, how is this even happening right now? It's unreal.
Yeah, and that's the point. The point is like, you need to prepare in your life. You need to prepare for the shitty moments, because they will happen. So when they happen, you need to have done a little bit of homework to prepare, so that if you can't do anything else, at least you can feed yourself and hydrate yourself appropriately, just so that you can be well enough. Now, I'm not giving, I don't want to give my wife a hard time, because I wouldn't want to go through what she went through. 3 years of the shit that I put her through, at least until brain surgery, then her mum passing, like she deserves a break, right? Let's give her a break. But at the same time, it's like, okay, everyone needs to do what they need to do to get through as well as possible, because if she's gone and I'm gone, what are my kids going to do? And then we had to tell my parents, obviously we had to tell my parents about all of this stuff. They're losing their shit. And my brother is a great guy, but he's a bit of an emotional, never gonna be kind of guy. Like, he can't do those really emotional things, right? So I feel like I can't rely on them, and I've got to step up again, and I've got to rise above it again, and I've got to bring everybody calm and show, hey guys, I'm all right, I'm good. So I prepared for 3 years for brain surgery. I told my team of doctors, while I was getting anesthetized for them to open my head up, I told them, I've prepared for this for 3 years. I am the best patient you're ever going to have. My body is a vessel, like it's ready for this surgery. I'm going to be the best patient you experience, and we're going to have the best outcome. So I've done my job for you. I've done the preparation. What you guys need to do now is your job. And I know you guys are prepared. So we're going to have a great outcome. I'm telling them this. They're injecting me with an anesthetic.
Like 10, 9.
And then I'm gone.
Totally. Yeah. That's amazing. That to me is exactly, sorry, go ahead, finish.
And I was going to finish by saying, the feedback after the surgery was, the surgery went for way shorter than we expected, and you bled way less than we expected. I even had somebody hypnotize me to tell my body to bleed only the appropriate amount that was necessary to purge bad blood and do all those things, and not to bleed unnecessarily, because it wasn't going to be helpful for surgery.
Right. See, that's the stuff that you have to bring into any traumatic situation you go through, right? And I have that, my stroke, that whole thing was the most traumatic thing I've ever gone through for myself. I've had other experiences that were extremely challenging. One that shook me to the core and is still the scariest moment of my life that I won't talk about here. But I've had a lot of issues, a lot of situations where shit hits the fan, and you have to be prepared. You have no idea what's going to happen. So you can't be prepared for the exact thing. You can just be prepared to know that when something goes on, I will know what to do. My instincts will take over, my intuition will take over, and I will allow those things to drive me at that point. And I look at that when, I don't know, like I think about, it's such a weird analogy, but like I think about performing as a musician. And I remember performing, there was a show in Seattle that we played and we drove in and we set up, and then we had to go park the van somewhere. And I went out to park the van with like our merch guy or photographer, I don't know. And we were driving around, couldn't find a spot anywhere, and time was ticking and I had to get back to the show. And I remember like parking that, like parallel parking a van with a hitch in downtown Seattle and like, running to the venue, coming in the back door and getting on stage. And I had to now perform. I had to go into the space. I was super stressed. And then I got on stage and I turned and I looked at my bass player who's all warmed up and he was like, "You ready?" And I was like, "Yes, I am, because this is what I have to do now. This is my job right now, not parking the van, not worrying about if we're going to get a ticket. All I have to do is turn on and perform." And so it was like, if I hadn't prepared myself in so many different ways for that specific scenario of being ready to perform, I would have just, and maybe I would have had a bad show, and that's not a fun time. So it's like, that's a very low stakes analogy, but the high stakes stuff rings true. And I've been in those situations where it's just, you get in it and you just do the thing you have to do. And I say the words that need to be said, and that's it, And I remember when we, another analogy, my wife and I went out to do some errands, came home, and our cat broke her elbow, and we had no idea. And we were like, whoa, like we had just gotten her. It was like a month after we got her, and we had to go to the hospital. And I just like, when I allow myself to focus on the task at hand, I don't get emotional because there's no time for it. I'll be emotional after, when we're at the hospital and when she's in surgery and when she's doing the thing and the doctors tell us this, then we'll be good. Or when I get on stage, I'll be fine. And then after the show, I can be like, "Guys, let me tell you this story about trying to park the van," But it's like the emotion can come later, right? There's no time for it in the moment. And it seems like we both have that experience, which is important.
It's so
necessary.
important. And you know how you said those low stakes events are low stake, but they're the training for that big event that's coming that we don't know that's coming. And that's what's really great about these low stakes stuff. It's like, man, the cat broke its elbow, man. That's pretty high stakes to me anyway.
It's pretty high stakes. Yes, it was very much. We have two of them. It was traumatic.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And the animals can't in distress, and what you need to do is you need to be calm so that you can keep it calm and decrease the pain and suffering and whatever, right? And get the solution and solve it, right? So it all adds up to training you to expect to deal with the thing that's coming that we don't know. And I have this other thing that I live by. It's like expect the best, prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm forever expecting a great outcome. But if it doesn't come, I've got 25 solutions waiting in the wings somewhere to solve that problem. Right. And it's a bit frustrating because what happens is then people come to me for the solution instinctively because they know that I've got it. And it's like, freaking hell, I wish you guys had the solution one time, just so that I could, if I did croak it, if I wasn't here anymore, I feel comfortable that you guys are all right, that I'm going to let you, that you guys are going to overcome your life, whatever. And it's been really interesting because with my son, my oldest just moved out. He's 25. And even up until the day before he moved out, he'd be asking me, I say it lovingly to him now, right? But like the stupidest questions. Where should I park the car outside the house? Like, dude, wherever there's a spot, just park the freaking car. Why do you have to ask me that? But what I realized was while he was living under this roof, this guy is a successful guy at work. Like, he doesn't need his dad to give him these answers. But while we're under the same roof, we're playing the role of father, at the top of the hierarchy, for example, son beneath him, needs permission for everything and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like going crazy. I'm trying to let him run free and trying to let him grow up and become an adult, and it couldn't happen. He needed to move out for that to occur. There needed to be this metaphorical death of his father so that he doesn't come to me to solve problems like, where should I park the car? Like,
right.
Seriously, man, like, just
there's like, I don't have children, so I can't speak to parenthood. I manage teams, and so I can speak to management, people management.
They're the same, mate. They're like your children.
Yeah. And like, there's I manage a team of designers right now, and I want them to succeed. My goal is for them to do good work, to be able to do the work they want to do, to provide them with work streams to do so, and to be able to provide them tools to evaluate themselves so that we can talk about their future and how they can grow. And I have to get out of their way, and I have to let them do their thing. And sometimes that's going to be making mistakes. It's natural, and it's okay. And I'm willing to take that risk in certain situations. But I want to train them, provide them space to do the things they need to do. And that's that training. That's the low stakes stuff. I can measure what's low stakes enough that if it goes wrong, it's all good. It's not a big deal. And I'll take credit for it going wrong, right? But when there's successes, that's all them. They do. When we win, they win. I'm there to help and go, yay. But when we lose, that's on me, because that means I didn't have the foresight to figure out, what was needed or how the team should be configured. And that's fine. That's what I signed up for. That's what I do. That's my job. But when when they come to me with those types of questions where I'm like, it's okay, you can make a decision. You're allowed. I'm going to give you space to make the decision. You're going to do it. It's going to be all good, because we can always pivot. We're not brain surgeons here, right? to be relevant. We're just, we're designers, like designing stuff for aviation. Like it's pretty low stakes. Like we're not gonna, anyway, all that to say, we have to provide that space for ourselves as well, right?
Nice.
Going through that space.
Nice.
We have to say, hey, it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay if I don't have all the answers. And it's okay to rely on people who feel like they might be unreliable, but maybe they're not, because we have to give them a chance. And I can sense for you that there was a lot of pressure on you at the time. And it sounds like there's a lot of growth happening for everyone as well. But, I didn't have that experience, but I did have the pressure on myself to be well. And that's, I had no control of that, really. I had to, I did, of course, I had to eat well and not overexert myself and these types of things. But at the end of the day, I still hold myself to a very high standard, and I still have to cut myself some slack, a lot of the time. And I don't do that. And that's not fair, because I treat my employees and like my team members like they can do no wrong, because they're trying, they're doing their best, and they're really good at what they do. But I don't give myself that same amount of respect, and it's terrible. It's not going to be beneficial for anyone. And I kind of sense that you have a little bit of that too, where you feel like you need to do it. And then when you can't, or you don't, maybe you feel like you let yourself down. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth,
Yeah,
but
that's
kind of,
that's pretty close. What I realize is that I'm the biggest obstacle to my own recovery.
Right. Yeah.
And sure, the other people are too, but the story I tell myself about the other people is just a bullshit story that I'm telling. So I am the biggest person who gets in the way of my recovery the most. I either don't sleep well, eat well enough, I work too much, I stress too much, I don't meditate enough, I don't take time out for myself to do the things that I love, that are my passion. So I am the biggest person that gets in the way the most of my lifestyle recovery, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I've got to go meta. I've got to observe myself and how I'm impacting myself in my world, and I've got to go, okay, enough of doing things that you dislike, you don't get pleasure out of, enough of saying yes to people that you should be saying no to, enough of doing all that kind of stuff. And it's hard because I did that yesterday, right? So in these lockdowns in Australia, well, in Melbourne, we've had the most lockdowns than any other city in the world, right? And it's been the,
along, yeah.
oh God, man, it's the hardest 2 years of my life almost. It's harder than stroke almost, this whole thing, right? Because other people were impacting my ability to move. And regardless of what the underlying reason was, which was theoretically a great reason because we don't want to spread the virus and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You're still dealing with being told you can't go anywhere by somebody else, right?
Totally.
So in that time, we're struggling with work, we're struggling with all these things. And somebody says to me, look, I need this handrail installed on some stairs. And I'm like, yeah, no worries. I'm happy to come and do it. I haven't got any work, so, I'll come and do it. So, but there's then restrictions placed on whether you can enter somebody's home and who can work and under what conditions you can work. And I'm like, dude, the restrictions are now that I can't come in here, can't do this. This was about 3 months ago. And we had a snap 7-day lockdown that lasted for 2.5 months, So I never went back to this guy. And I said, and then he calls me a couple of days ago and he says, can you come and do this quote for this handrail? I said, I can't, because what's happened in Australia, I don't know what's like the rest of the world, but in Australia right now is we rely a lot of international guests to come and work here and fill positions that normally can't be filled by the locals because there's not enough of us. And there's this labor shortage. So it doesn't matter how much work you have, you cannot find people to do the work. We have ads out and you can't get people to do the work. So we've got more work than we can handle for months and months and months in advance. And it's like, I can't come because I can't get through the work that I've got and I'm stuck. Yeah. That was a difficult conversation to have. So I don't want to let him down. I want to go and do that, but I actually can't. It is important to me, but so are all the other people who have paid and are waiting for me to deliver an outcome. Yeah. And I had to tell him that, and he got really mad.
Oh no.
And it's like that really mad part that people do is the part that makes it hard for me to say no. Yeah. Because I don't like making people mad. Not that I did, he made himself mad, but I don't like to be involved in that interaction.
You don't want to be a part of it.
Yeah. And the old me would normally go, you know what? Let me come and sort it out.
Oh, interesting.
Right. I'd hate the whole time I was going there. I'd get annoyed when I had to order the parts and then go and install them. I'd get annoyed when he hadn't paid like the initial, the initial deposit on the time. And then I'd get annoyed when he hadn't paid the follow-up money on the time. And then I'd be doing that work all day, every day. And I never would say no to these people. And then it's like, wow, I hate my life. Yeah. And I blame them. I blame all of them.
Yeah, exactly. Blame everybody else.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not true.
That right. And that acknowledgement of like creating those stories, those bullshit stories, as you refer to them, is so real. We create the stories, our ego creates the stories to allow us to be perfect. Oh, we're perfect. I'm perfect. That guy got mad. Forget that guy. That's not, what's my responsibility? It comes back to the talk that you had, the thing that you said earlier about like going to a funeral and how to act at a funeral. Nobody's there for you. Nobody cares that you're there in reality. If you didn't go, no one's going to miss you. So when you're there, be quiet, be respectful, and move on, right? These are like the things that oftentimes that's all you have to do. Just be quiet, be respectful, and do your thing. And it's like, but we have to allow ourselves that space to acknowledge the bullshit that we create. I create so much. And for me, it was always in relationship. And so I've been married just over a year, actually. We got married like at the for us, it was the peak pre-vaccine of the pandemic. Just us and the two friends, because we didn't want to be unsafe. But my bullshit stories came in relationship, and now my wife is unreal. She's amazing, and she provides me space to see the bullshit that I'm creating. Do you know what I mean? I'm always like, you know, I don't always, not always, but the moments of my ego comes in, and it's like, she said something mean, she's the worst, right? That's my ego talking. And I'm like, wait a second, was that really mean? Did she really mean that? What did she say? How did she say it? Would she do that? Has she given me any evidence for me to believe that she would say or do anything to hurt me? No. Okay, so shut the fuck up. Pardon my language. And I have to tell myself that when those things happen. And that, I think, is like, it ties into the recovery, you know?
Yeah,
It ties into saying, I need to focus, and all the fears that I have are unfounded because I have a good team of doctors. You know, I was lucky to have a good team of doctors. I had support from friends. And it wasn't like, my experience was my experience, but it was not at the severity of so many other experiences like mine. And I had to recognize that. And I remember one of my neurologists who was like on call one day came in and was checking in on me in the hospital. How you doing? And my vision, because I said how my vision went down to a pinhole, it actually came back mostly. Now it's reversed. So I have a blind spot, but it's pretty nominal. I can play tricks with it. Like if I look at the ground and there's a penny on the ground, I don't see the penny if I look at a certain angle. Do you know what I mean? So it's weird. But ultimately, my vision mostly came back, and I have a small blind spot. And I was like complaining about it to him in the hospital. I was like, this is just weird. And he was like, have you ever seen the diving bell and the butterfly? And I was like, yeah, I have. And he's like, you could have been like centimeters away from that happening. So is this really that bad? He was like trying to bust my chops, rightfully so. And I was like, you're right. Thank you. You know, thanks. See you. And I think about that all the time because, you know, I'm so lucky and I'm so grateful from what I experienced, and that was the severity. That was as far as it got. But I need to give myself space to feel those things, to not live in those feelings, you know. So.
And you're allowed to feel those feelings and move on from them. Experience it.
Yeah.
Go,
Yep.
oh, that was an interesting feeling. Well, all right, let's just move on from it, and let's find another one that's more serving to us, more serving to our relationship, better serving the recovery, better serving us in life and other people around us. And it's like, okay, I'm entitled to feel those feelings. Well, let's just do it for as little time as possible and then move on to something else.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I agree with that. And I love what your doctor says, because some of the things that I get feedback from people who are recovering from deficits on one side is that they've got this comparison that they do. So the fact that they've got the comparison is like, that side that doesn't feel correct should be feeling like this side. Well, no, it should be feeling like the shitty side that it feels, because that's what a stroke does to it. If you didn't have a stroke, then that's fine. And if there was no reason for it to feel different, then that's fine, what you're saying. But the fact that you have had a stroke, like, it should feel shitty. And I'm not saying that you're going to love that, or it's going to be amazing, or it won't be painful, or it won't be annoying. Unfortunately, that's what it's supposed to feel like. I don't know what to do about that, but right now, because we might not have the answers for that, but if you can accept that that's what happens when you have a stroke and now you have to deal with it, that's fine. Every single day, my left side, if I had to compare the two, I'm a perfect Gemini now. Like, I'm born in June, my star sign is Gemini. I am completely two different people on one side of my body and on the other side of my body. I feel it, I experience it. They walk differently, they move differently, they feel differently. Everything about it is different. And one side experiences pain more dramatically and cold more dramatically and the heat more dramatically. I even perspire sometimes on one side of my body and not on the other side of my body.
Oh my God, that is insane.
And
it is what it is.
Yeah, and it's not pleasant, but what the hell am I going to do about it? I can't.
What are you going to
change
do?
it.
Complain?
Yeah, and by overthinking it, I can't change it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't change. It doesn't get better. So yeah,
Yeah.
you had a spontaneous vertebral artery dissection. So where's it at now? How did they manage that? How have they resolved it?
Yeah, so there was the fear for me that they were going to have to do surgery. They didn't. Basically, what they did is they put me on Coumadin and um, um, what's the other one? Oh my gosh, I forgot. That's good. I forgot. It's been so long. There's another blood thinner that's like you can only use in hospitals. I forget what it's called. But I was on Coumadin and this other thing. I'm really happy that I don't remember it, to be honest. That means the story is going so far away that it's not defining me. But anyway, I was on heparin. That's what it is, of course. Anyway, I was on these two drugs during my stay at the hospital, which basically just like, thinned my blood out so that the blood would just cruise right through, bust the clot, and the blood would just go right through to my brain. And then the artery healed on its own. So it was able to do its thing, as arteries do.
Wow.
And then I went in for MRIs every couple months just to make sure everything was good. And I was on Coumadin for like, I think 4 months, which was pretty brief, given what I went through. And then I remember taking my last dose of Coumadin and was basically good. Now I just take baby aspirin every day. And I haven't had the first like year or two, there was stuff, it was a roller coaster. And then since then, I've only had one point of fear. Well, two. One was an experience at home that I had, and this is like right after I had met my wife. She was my girlfriend at the time, and I had an episode, and it wasn't related, but I didn't know, and she freaked out, understandably. She knew that I had the strokes, and it's a scary thing to introduce a partner to. Oh, by the way, I've had strokes, and that means I'm more likely to have one in the future. Cool. And then another time I was traveling and I was in Rome, and 2 weeks of just terrible headaches. And my friend, amazingly, who I was staying with, unfortunately, her mother passed from a stroke many years prior, but she still had contact with those doctors. And so she was like, if you need a doctor, like I got the guy for sure. And so I was under her care, and kind of her and her boyfriend helped me and just made me feel safe that if anything did happen, they had the right thing. But that was just headaches for 2 weeks, and that was it. And subsequently, it's standard stuff. I get super lightheaded when I stand up. If I sleep wrong, it's just always exacerbates right here. It's pretty minor given everything though. So I'm very lucky to be where I am today.
Yeah, I remember traveling as well to Greece. Maybe, I think it was a few years after I'm pretty sure it was before brain surgery, and I was in Greece and feeling like maybe I'm having another one, and it's so scary. And traveling to the States and buying the most expensive insurance you could get, so that in the event that anything went wrong. And then I had the fear that I had to overcome of being in an airplane for 30 hours before we got to California. And it's like, if it happens, I've got 30 hours. Like, if it doesn't happen in the plane, whatever, after that, if it happens anywhere else,
there's hospitals.
Yeah, we're okay. And that whole idea of trying to be excited about the flight and not give away that I was afraid of it, too much. But then I wasn't involved in the organizing of the trip. My wife was doing it all, and she was trying to work out, why isn't this guy keen? Like, why doesn't he want to go down that path? And I'm crapping my pants. I don't want to get to. I don't want to get to this situation again. And I don't know if the situation is resolved. Now, I did have the blessing of my doctors, but I wasn't taking any medication. There was nothing to do for this bleed. It was just hope to God that it didn't bleed again for 3 years. And anyway, we got away with it. But yeah, it's a little bit terrifying, and I can understand why people would be reluctant to have an experience, because they're thinking, what if it happens again? And I want to say that that's normal, and people who are listening and watching, I want to make sure that they're comfortable going. There's this thing I'm noticing that's strange. and I'm not sure what it is. So I don't feel good about it. So you know what? Let's go and get that checked out. Go to the doctor, go to the emergency room, go wherever you need to go to actually ease your concern and allow you to start to understand the difference between the stroke and this thing that you're experiencing that's not a stroke.
Right.
I was in the hospital every second week if I had to be, because something happened and I wasn't feeling quite right.
Yeah. Yep.
And even though I haven't had any real dramas since 2014 when I had surgery, I still went back in the last couple of years before all the lockdowns and before COVID. I remember going back and going for a checkup because I had this massive headache or something was going wrong. And I went to the ER and I said to him, listen, I'm a former brain surgery survivor. I've had, 3 bleeds and I had an AVM and this stuff's going on and I don't know what it is. And because of my history, I thought I'd come and get it checked out. And they're like, okay, fair enough. So we went through the process. We ruled all of that stuff out, but it was the smart thing to do, because previously when I had those weird, strange feelings, I said, it's nothing. I'll be right, off to work.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I had the same experience when I got out of the hospital for the first stretch. The doctor was like, you feel anything, just come back, just go to the ER. It's all good. Like, no worries. And thankfully I had really good insurance. So any Americans watching or listening, like, they know the challenge of insurance. And I was very grateful to have amazing insurance that was huge for me at that time. But I went back to the ER like within a week after I got out, because something was funny. And they checked me out and they did the whole thing. And like, you're okay. It's just you're healing and you can feel it, I was like, okay. And so I learned that, okay, my vision's going to act funky until it settled, right? My vision would still like move. It was weird. And then I would get pains in my neck. And I had to recognize that, I was healing, and you can feel healing, and that's good. That's a good pain. And then your vision is finding its space to settle, right? And these were the things that I had to learn. I went to ophthalmologist, optometrist, brain doctors. I did MRIs, like I said before, a few times with contrast, the whole nines. And at a certain point, it was like, you're good, and like, go do your thing, and you're going to be okay. If anything comes up, if you feel anything weird, here are the tests you can do at home, right? And it's like the squeezing the hands and like the, pushing the knees and all these different things. And then if you need it beyond that, go to the ER, and it's totally okay. It's perfectly acceptable to be afraid.
Yeah.
I still get afraid, and it's okay. When I wake up in the morning and I have pain, I go, there's the split second of not again. And then, no, it's not that. And then I move on,
Yeah. And it's been a long time. And this is the thing, like,
Yeah.
people need to understand that stroke recovery is ongoing. It kind of never ends. And you're always going back to that moment or some space in time, and you're always thinking about it. And it's okay. If it's fleeting, then it's all right. It comes into your mind. It spends a little time there and then it goes away. If it's not, then you need to work out why it's still in your mind and how you can ease that, what you need to learn to overcome that, how you need to upgrade your skills or your emotional state or your mental state, who you need to get support from. Well, I've been in counseling since I was 25, and I go still. And in lockdown, we weren't able to go to counseling, and that was a real drama. But I'm in counseling and I go there, and that's where I go to get somebody to give me to give me another perspective of my behavior, how I act, what I'm feeling, is it legitimate, so that we can just hash it out and see if we can, see if I can evolve further, continue to evolve my way of response, and my way of responding to the world and to my situation and to the situation around us and to COVID. At the beginning, I was terrible. I was like so bad with the political aspect of how COVID has been dealt with in Melbourne. And then towards the end, it's like, I'm still dissatisfied with a lot of things, but I'm not interacting with that stuff now, and I'm not letting it occupy my mind as much because it's out of my control. I control the controllables. I can control my response and how I behave and what an example I'm setting, but I can't control what politicians are doing. Let's be honest. They're going to do what they want to do. So there's this.
It's a great quote. Control the controllables.
Yeah, right. It's not my quote. I think it came from, one of the ancient philosophers or something. But I hear about it. I hear about it a lot from a guy called Ryan Holiday, who wrote a book called, which I have right here, which is called "The Obstacle Is the Way."
Yeah.
Right.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's a great book, actually, amazing book. And we're at that point. I'm at that point where, you seek help out to ease your mind about that thing that you felt. I do that as well. And then I also seek out help to go and get another perspective of this part of me that I haven't mastered yet, this need to go into the rabbit hole of, nuttiness or craziness or anger or, whatever it is. So that's what we're encouraging here. We're encouraging seek out support or help from wherever you can.
Yeah, I've been going to my therapist since I was, oh my God, probably 27, 28 years old. I'm 42, so however long that is. And he's been amazing to me. And during this, I remember, oh man, it was so funny. I had to call him and cancel an appointment because we had our standing appointment, and I missed it because I was in the hospital. So I had to call him, and he was like, "Yeah, like, where are you? You okay?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm in the hospital. I had a stroke." And he was like, "Oh my God." And this was in September, right? And so at the end of the year, I still met with him during that period. But he ended up waiving all my fees because he was like, "You went through something terrible. Don't worry about it." And I mean, like, that's like a serious, I mean, we were like best friends at that point, you know what I mean? And I still talk to him. I talked to him just a week and a half ago. I talk to him regularly, and I need him, I need that space. He's a person, and he's a great person. But he's going to retire at some point, but I need that space, a third party, that unbiased opinion, who cares just enough, right? And who will tell you how it is from a psychological perspective, because I'm not a psychologist, just like I'm not a neurologist. I'm not a psychologist. That's not my job. Here's what's going on in me. Help.
Yes.
Tell me what you think,
Yes.
And so it's that delegation again, right? It's so valuable.
And it's non-judgmental. That's why I sorted out initially. It's because I always felt like a little bit of a black duck in my family. I have these ideas and these thoughts and this method of approaching life, and it didn't always work at home. Like, it didn't fit in, and it was weird. And I always used to feel like they don't get me, and they don't, because they go about life differently, right?
Yeah.
And I used to go there, non-judgmental. And I had a relationship with this lady for 20 something years, and I thought she was never going to retire or always be around. And she passed away about a year and a half ago. She was
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you, man. She was 83, and she passed away in practice, like helping somebody. And it was like, it was nutty. I had spoken to her a few weeks before that, and we were at that stage where the family had been there. My wife had been through, my kids had been through, all together, all separately, all over the place over the years.
Yeah.
And that one relationship was kind of the one solid guiding, always had my back kind of relationship that I could always go back to reroute and to readjust and to sort of revisit all the stuff that was bothering me, or that I thought I was annoyed about, that was somebody else's fault or whatever, And when she passed away in this last sort of 18 months or whatever, it's been, I can't remember, I think it's been nearly a year or more. That's when I missed that opportunity to go and see her. Therefore, I struggled through those early phases of COVID lockdowns and all that type of thing. And then recently picked up another amazing counselor, and things have started to settle down a bit as the restrictions have lifted, everything's sort of come together again, you know. So it's, I think, one of my most valuable relationships. I'll miss her forever. And she was just an amazing, staunch lady. She had my back all the time. And I never once did it feel like, even though I was paying her for a time, never once did it feel like this whole thing that some people do is like, you know, why would I go and pay somebody to sit there and listen to me? They don't really give a shit, right? Well, they do give a shit. That's why they have this career. That's why they spent 12 years at university or wherever, to become somebody that you can go to and get support from, unbiased, without judgment, all the time. I mean, no matter what.
That the response to therapy that I run into in the past from certain people is, why would I, exactly what you said, why would I pay someone to tell me what's wrong with me? And I'm like, no, he's never told me what's wrong with me. He doesn't tell me anything. He allows me the space to make the connections myself. He allows me the space to see myself through his unbiased eyes, a professional unbiased eyes. So yeah, to me, I will absolutely pay someone for that, because none of my friends can do that because they care. They're too close. And he's just far enough, but he also cares. I had a stroke survival part, actually, after the fact. And I invited him thinking he wouldn't show up because that's weird, you know. He came, he met my parents, you know, he met all my friends, like he was there hanging out, you know, and it was great. So, you know, it's irreplaceable. And I feel for you that you lost someone that you've worked with for so long. And I'm sure it's going to be great with this new person, because I know, like, that's why I said, like, he's a person and he fills a role, but as a person, he is extremely valuable to me. You know, he happens to be my psychologist as well, right? And so there's that relationship that can be developed in time.
And you can't have a relationship of a psychologist without a psychologist. Like, he has to be that person. If you hang out with him outside of the practice, then he's a friend, and the relationship has changed and it's evolved, and it's no longer this non-judgmental, non-bias, you know, always got your back kind of space. It's a different space. Things are different because you're interacting together in a more usual way or common way, you know.
Absolutely.
So where are you at with the whole recovery now? How's the band going? How have things changed over the last 9 years as you're coming into your 10th year?
I mean, things are amazing. My life is fantastic. Like I said, I got married just over a year ago. Our life has been fantastic. We have two awesome little kitties, and I know you have at least one cat, right? Yeah, and so we have two cats who keep us occupied, and we love them. I have like thousands of pictures of them. I just take pictures of them all day, you know. And then as far as music goes, I've been working. It's been a challenging time during COVID for music, because I've always been writing, and COVID kind of hit, and I just kind of struggled a little bit in that space. And it was like hard for me to find any inspiration, which was natural. And as I talked to people who are in creative spaces, they would say the same thing. Well, it's been difficult, right? Some people were able to turn it on and just go nuts and put stuff out, and that's awesome. I wasn't. But my wife and I play in a band together, and we're working on music slowly but surely. And it's hopefully going to be ready for the light of day next year, mid next year, hopefully. And, you know, just kind of always seeing what kind of projects are out there. But for me, one of the biggest accomplishments that I've had in the last few years is finding my role in that design manager space. And that's been really grateful. This is the first time in my life that it's been a grateful opportunity, but it's the first time in my life that I love my job. And I've always just worked to get paid, and that was it. Because I don't make a living on music or photographer or these other things I do. But finding design and finding my value in that space has been wonderful. It's also one of these things that, like, I consider myself a very social person. I love people. I love getting to know people. I love these types of situations where I get to learn people's stories. And in a role of people management and design, there's this great crossover where I'm always meeting people and helping people and providing space for them to be seen and heard, and also learning a whole ton myself, because I only know this much and these other people have access to depths of knowledge that I have no idea. So it's fun to learn from everyone. And that's been great. I've been really lucky in that space. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's like when the anniversaries come, we celebrate. Like I said, we hang out with friends and kick it, have a couple drinks, and next year will be 10, and it's going to be it'll be interesting to see where we are at that point, but I'm looking forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. How important is to have this passion project on the side that you guys are working on? It's a long distant project, and there's always something that's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
But you're not getting paid for it. So what's the point of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's the question I always ask myself. Why do I do this? Right. For a long time, the answer was because I have to. I felt the need. I had to make music. And now it's coming back to because I want to. And I'd rather be there. There was, when I first started playing guitar, I didn't know what I was doing. It was the child's mind, and it was beautiful, and I just made stuff up, and some of it was good, some of it wasn't good. It didn't matter. I didn't care if it was good or not. I just wanted it to come out of me and have my colleagues in my bands think it was good. And then I got really focused on trying to make music that maybe other people are really gonna like. And then I started thinking about, why am I doing it? Because I don't get paid a lot. I mean, I get paid streaming royalties, which are like insignificant, and that's a whole other conversation. But now I feel like, I have to write music again because I want to, and finding that joy in that space is really valuable to me. And I want to find that joy again because it's been gone for a few years, not that it's been not joyful. It's just harder to tap into regularly. So
yeah, when there's a lot of emotional turmoil happening around us because of all the stuff that's going on in the world, it's hard to be creative. I mean, I think where creativity really lives is in the heart, right? And if you can't connect to your heart, well, then you're going to be struggling to be creative. You can't think a song into existence. You have to feel it as well. You can't just write down the notes and then get somebody to sing it without any heart. Like, this just doesn't work.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah.
And that's part of the challenge. Where is my heart? What do I want to say? What do I have to say? Is this valuable? Do I even want to put this out there to be heard? And I have to figure that out, so it's part of the process.
Steve, it's been amazing getting to know you and chatting to you. And I really want to thank you for being on the podcast and for sharing your journey and your story. I think this is a really valuable episode for people listening. If you're kind of listening and you haven't really paid attention to many things, that's fine as well. But go back and listen a couple of times, because some of the stuff that we've shared here is really important to your recovery, is really important to your life going forward. But not only your life, like everybody's life that you're interacting with and that you impact. So hopefully you get as much out of this episode as I got out of it. I've just absolutely thoroughly loved this. And I wish you well, man. And with the 10th year of, with the anniversary coming up in the next 12 months or so, I hope it's a smashing year now that things are sort of starting to settle down.
Thank you, Bill. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. I'm so grateful that you've made the time and we finally got to connect. And I agree, this has been very helpful for me to get your story and to talk to you and to share with someone who knows. I don't meet stroke survivors that often, so when I do, I'm always like, let's talk. And I'm glad you took the time to share your story too. So thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the show. I hope you got a lot out of it and learned something new. And I hope that it's given you a bit of an insight into some of the things that go on in the mind of somebody who's had a stroke, reflecting back after 8 or 9 years. so that you can get an understanding of how far you can come, especially if you're early on in your recovery phase. Now, whether you've been navigating your journey for weeks, months, or years, I know firsthand how difficult it can be to get the answers you need. The road is both physically and mentally challenging, from reclaiming your independence to getting back to work and rebuilding your confidence and more. Your symptoms don't follow a rule book, and as soon as you leave hospital, you no longer have medical professionals on tap. I know for me, it felt as if I was teaching myself a new language from scratch with no native speaker in sight. If this sounds like you, I'm here to tell you that you're not alone, and there is a better way to navigate your recovery and rebuild a fulfilling life that you love. I've created an inclusive, supportive, and accessible membership community called Recovery After Stroke. This all-in-one support and resource program is designed to help you take back your health into your own hands. This is your guidebook through every step in your journey, from reducing fatigue to strengthening your brain health to overcoming anxiety and more. To find out more and to join the community for just $1, head to recoveryafterstroke.com. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.
Importantly, we present many podcasts designed to give you an insight and understanding into the experiences of other individuals. Opinions and treatment protocols discussed during any podcast are the individual's own experience, and we do not necessarily share the same opinion, nor do we recommend any treatment protocol discussed. All content on this website and any linked blog, podcast, or video material controlled this website or content is created and produced for informational purposes only and is largely based on the personal experience of Bill Gassiamis. The content is intended to complement your medical treatment and support healing. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice and should not be relied on as health advice. The information is general and may not be suitable for your personal injuries, circumstances, or health objectives. Do not use our content as a standalone resource to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease for therapeutic purposes or as a substitute for the advice of a health professional. Never delay seeking advice or disregard the advice of a medical professional, your doctor, or your rehabilitation program based on our content. If you have any questions or concerns about your health or medical condition, please seek guidance from a doctor or other medical professional. If you are experiencing a health emergency or think you might be, call 000 if in Australia, or your local emergency number immediately for emergency assistance, or go to the nearest hospital emergency department. Medical information changes constantly. While we aim to provide current, quality information in our content, we do not provide any guarantees and assume no legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, currency, or completeness of the content. If you choose to rely on any information within our content, you do so solely at your own risk. We are careful with links we provide. However, third-party links from our website are followed at your own risk, and we are not responsible for any information you find there.